First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby in the baby carriage. Or so it used to be. Now we have trans drag shows for children, abortion to the point of birth, medical procedures to change boys into girls, critical race theory, and radical LGBT ideology taught in most government schools across America. And the media and politicians and celebrities tell us how amazing it is that our society has progressed to this point. While at the same time, we are told the biggest threat to democracy is the suburban mother who shows up to a school board meeting, or now the shadowy specter of, well, Christianity showing up everywhere. The question that I get to as we figure all of this out, as we look through what is really happening and what is really going on in America is this. What do you want your world to look like? What do you want your family to look like? What do you want your community to look like? I'm Matt Odegaard. Welcome to Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. I am Matt Odegaard, and I'm glad that you have joined me here today. After a little bit of a hiatus, I'm back and excited to share some things and see what is going on in the world and what is going on in our world that we need to talk about and figure out as we seek after following Jesus and living in this world. Those are my two goals that I want to help you with, that I try to do every single day, and hopefully you want to do that same thing too. Hopefully you want to seek after God with all of your heart and soul and mind and strength and live in this world and figure out what that means. And more, it is a weird and crazy place. So today, we're talking about Christian nationalism. And we're talking about Christian nationalism because it's a really big thing, apparently, according to everyone. Apparently, everyone is now saying that Christian nationalism is one of the biggest issues that is plaguing our democracy. It is the threat to our democracy. Why? What does that even mean? What is Christian nationalism and why are we where we are? When ostensibly we were founded on Christian ideals and biblical morality, now we're a nation that is at war with itself, sometimes literally, but at least ideology. From an ideas perspective, we are at war with ourselves, and we can't seem to figure out what is going on. And I want to unpack a little bit of that today, and I actually want to go a little bit deeper today than maybe we usually do. And before we get there, I just want to thank you for being part of this channel. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, go ahead and like and subscribe, give a rating if you're on Apple or Google or whatever. I really appreciate that. It helps. And if this is helpful to you and you think you know somebody who will be helped by this information, send it to them, share it with them, text it to them right now or when you're done, and email it to them, because I want people to understand how to live in this world. And I was even talking to another pastor a couple of days ago that there's just not a lot of resources out there to try to make sense of all of the craziness that is going on. So I want to help with that in any way that I can. If this is helpful to you, share it with somebody else and we'll go on from there. All right. So the question that I was raising today, and I think we have to get down to these questions and we have to really figure out for ourselves these questions, like, what kind of community do you want to live in? That really is the bottom line. And you may think, I just live where I live and I have no impact on the world around me. And that's just not true. That's part of the reason I do what I do. You do have an impact on the world that you live in. You have an impact in your family and your friends, your work community, and sometimes beyond. And you can have as much of an impact as you want to have, but you have to answer that question. What kind of community do you want to live in? What kind of country do you want to live in? And a more pointed question really at this point is, what kind of country do we currently live in? And that's what I want to get to the heart of. And unfortunately, we have to start at this place that I don't even really want to start with. And I've mentioned this before. I'm tired of talking about these kinds of things, but unfortunately, because they're happening with more and more frequency, we have to talk about these things. In Dallas over the weekend, this went all over the internet because there was a drag show. And it wasn't just a regular drag show. It was a drag show specifically for kids. It was titled something like Drag Your Kids to a Drag Show or something like that. I didn't even look up the actual title. You can go and look it up. Actually, I encourage you not to go and look it up, but it really did happen and you can go and watch it. I'm going to play a clip here. And so one, I hesitate to even play this, but we have to play it because we have to understand what we're talking about. And in this clip, which is not of the drag show particularly, because I didn't want to play any clips of that intentionally, but it's about some of the performers afterwards talking about what this means to them and more in general. And I think that's the important thing here. So listen to how they describe the impact of this drag show for kids.
We did not choose this fight.
Yep, press the wrong one. Here you go.
Think the event went today?
I think it was amazing. I never get to perform in front of children. So, performing in front of children, I have 6 other younger siblings. So it was very emotional. I loved it. It was probably one of the best shows I've ever done.
What do you say to the conservative parents that wouldn't bring their children to an event like this?
Why? Here's the thing. I don't think that there is any kind of issue with exposing children to this, because especially if your child is in the community, or you may think they are. I just think that drag is educational.
Do you think that exposing children to drag will lead children to do drag in the future in the long run?
Not if they don't want to do drag. I'm a gay man and I don't want to do drag. So I don't think, no, absolutely not.
It's not grooming. It's not. You will be what you are. We're not going to turn you into something else because you come and see this event.
So a couple of things going on here in this clip, and I think it's important to highlight some of the things that people said about this. And again, if you're just listening and not watching, there was a drag show in Dallas that was specifically, intentionally targeted at children. It was drag your kids to this drag show. And it's so that's why we have to highlight this, because this is not just adults being adults and doing whatever adults do. This is adults intentionally aiming at children to, what else can you say? Groom them, indoctrinate them into this lifestyle intentionally. And one of the people, the performers, the second person that you heard from, again, if you're not watching, the second person that we heard from, which was one of the performers, said it is literally educational. Kids should be here because it teaches them, intentionally so. That is the point, and it absolutely does. Then you have some of the bystanders who are like, well, it doesn't teach you, you just are who you are. And we know that's obviously not true. It's this whole thing that we've talked about with critical race theory, LGBTQAA+ ideology, etc. It doesn't exist, and we don't teach it in schools, but when we do teach it to kids, it's really important because they need to learn it. It's both things. They say it doesn't exist, and it's not really a part of anything, except that when we do teach it, it's the most important thing that we teach. And that's what we're hearing here. It's the most important thing that we teach children is how to be trans, but the fact that they're becoming trans because we're teaching them to be trans is only ancillary because they were going to be trans anyway. This is the ludicrous reasoning that people have, that by indoctrinating little children into this, and again, I can't play you any of the clips because I just don't feel comfortable doing it, but you have little kids taking dollar bills and shoving them in the, what do I say, clothing of some of these men dressed up as women in drag. And this is okay, and we're supposed to think this is good and revolutionary and progressive and wonderful for these little children to learn these things. No, this is debased and it's terrible for children, period. There is no way around that. And this is the question that I'm going to come back to a lot in this episode. What kind of community do you want to live in? Is this the community that you want to live in, where kids go to drag shows and it's okay, where kids learn transgender and radical LGBTQ ideology in class and critical race theory in class? Is this the world that you want? And if it is, then you've got it. And if it isn't, then you have to say, well, then, is there something else we can do? Is there more that we can do to try to say, this isn't what we want something different? And why are these two worlds at such odds? Why are we wrestling with this to such a big degree now? I had another person ask me over the weekend, why is this such a big issue now? 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't an issue at all. Well, the fact is it was. We just didn't talk about it enough, and the slippery slope fallacy became a reality. And that is where we are, and that is why we are where we are. And that's a longer issue. And we're going to actually get into a little bit of why we are where we are. And I'm going to introduce a book. I read a lot of books. I think you should read a lot of books too. I'm going to introduce a book to you today that we're going to talk about because I think it's important to understand why we are where we are. And that helps us then understand what to do with it. So I know that was the drag show clip, but the reason that we needed to start with that is you need to understand the world that you're in, and you need to decide what world you want to be in. But what we're really talking about is this idea that has come up of Christian nationalism. And really what I see is an attack on Christianity, period, just writ large. That and we've gone back and forth on this with Marxism and socialism and communism, because essentially the whole goal of all of those ideologies, including all the capital T theories and critical race theory and critical social justice and all these others, really the whole goal is just to get rid of God and get rid of religion. And that's just true. But more and more currently, what we're seeing is an attack on Christianity in the mainstream people, mainstream articles, mainstream issues are saying Christianity is just by nature really bad. So even over this last week, I read several articles that said how Christianity itself is the thing that is wrong with America. And if we could just get rid of it, then America would be much better. In some of the articles, the threat was veiled in some colloquial term of Christian nationalism, whatever that is. And we're going to talk about what that is because it's defined in one of these articles. And I think we need to take their definition, because when someone tells you what they believe, you should believe them. However, the bottom line from your cultural betters, I believe, is that really it's Christianity itself that is poisoning, quote, our democracy. So one of the articles I read was called Why Christian Nationalism is Suddenly at the Forefront from MSNBC. And another article that was called Christian Nationalism on the Rise in Some GOP Campaigns from the AP. Both of these articles, similar response, similar point of view, and we're going to look at a couple of these because I think it's important to understand where these people are coming from so that we can understand their worldview and understand our place in this new worldview that has come up. And we've reached the point where these two competing views are running the country, and one of them is winning. And the one that is winning says things like this. This is the clip that I accidentally hit earlier that we're going to listen to now about, I guess you'd say, ostensibly democracy.
We did not choose this fight. We had our own dreams for our lives, the same as you did when you were kids, but we can't let you get away with this anymore. Enough is enough. Enough of you telling us that school shootings are a fact of life when every other country like ours has virtually ended it. Enough of you blaming mental illness and then defunding mental health care in this country. Enough of your thoughts and prayers. Enough. Enough. You will not stop us from advancing the Protecting Our Kids Act today. You will not stop us from passing it in the House next week, and you will not stop us there. If the filibuster obstructs us, we will abolish it. If the Supreme Court objects, we will expand it, and we will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation in our communities. Each and every day, we will do whatever it takes to end gun violence, whatever it takes.
Now, this was one of our representatives, one of our state representatives. And what the topic of discussion is here is gun violence. And there's a lot of thoughts about that. And I'm not even going to particularly get into that today. But the point of this is when someone tells you what they believe, you should listen to them. And what you're hearing here is, and what you'll hear as we get into this article in a moment, it is that you, if you're a Christian, are dangerous to democracy. But we, if you don't pass the laws that you want and the laws that we need, we're just going to blow up the whole democratic system and get what we want anyway. This representative says, if you don't pass this and the filibuster gets in the way, we're just going to get rid of it. If you don't pass this and the Supreme Court gets in the way, we're just going to blow up the Supreme Court, like add members to the Supreme Court, which basically makes it functionally worthless. And we're just going to do what we want anyway. And they're saying we're not going to stop. This person says we're not going to stop. We're going to do whatever we want to do because it's the right thing to do. And you hear a great moral fixation when you hear about this. It is about morality. It is about right and wrong. It is about them saying we have the high ground morally and we're going to do the right thing. And if you stand in our way, we're going to remove the checks and balances that were written into the democratic system, the democratic republic system, the federal system. We're just going to remove them so that we can do the right thing, period. That's what we're hearing here. And this is not a unique voice. You hear this often, both from people in actual politics and, of course, celebrities and news reporters, quote unquote. But you hear this. This is the phraseology that we're hearing. We're going to do this. We're going to pass these laws that we believe are correct, and you cannot stand in our way because we are right, period. We can't have a dialogue about it. We can't have a conversation about it. We can't have a conversation to say even that I believe something should be done, you believe something should be done. The question we're arguing about is what should be done and how should we do it? No, that question is out the window. They have determined they have the right motives, they have the right actions, and they're going to do it regardless of what you say or do, and regardless of any legal standing, any executive power, any legislative branch that's in the way. They're just going to run it over and do whatever they want. They're saying this stuff out loud, and this is what they want. And while at the same time, what they're saying is actual nationalism, which means you believe your nation is a good nation that you live in because you live in the nation that you live in. Actual nationalism is a terrible thing, and you have to get rid of nationalism. So you have Marjorie Taylor Greene not directly responding to this, but responding to nationalism and even Christianity, which you'll hear in a moment, saying this.
You see, nationalism is a good thing. It's where all Americans should be. We should be wanting America first. We should be wanting our tax dollars, our focus, our legislation, our bills, and our leadership focused on our nation. We should be proud of nationalism, and we should be proud of an America first nationalism. And then lastly, we should be most proud of Christianity. So if Christian nationalism is something to be scared of, they're lying to you. And they're lying to you on purpose, because that is exactly the temperature change that is happening in America today, and they can't control it. They can't control it, and that's what terrifies them.
Now, I'm not the biggest fan of her and her politics and the way that she does things. However, she is 100% right on both of these points. One, that nationalism used to be, and even democratic. I mean, going back and listen to some Democrat leaders, politicians, presidents over the past even 50 years, or at least give 40 or 50 years and before that, they all talked about this. They all talked about how nationalism was amazing because we believe that America is a great place and that Christianity is the backbone of our morality, because without Christianity, how do you know what is right and wrong? And I've talked about that many times here, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And that is the goal that is against what we're going through. That is really what the problem is. So I want to talk more about these articles that say that Christian nationalism is really the problem in America. But before we get to that, I want to talk about this book, because I think this book helps us make sense of what is happening, even down to the identity, the heart level of some people in America, and apparently at this point, a large majority of people in America. This is Carl Trueman's The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. Now, here's the book. It's a little bit thick. Like I said, I do a lot of reading. You should definitely do some reading too. But this is a great book, and I'll read a quote from it in a moment. But here's the bottom line. The book is fantastic. It's a little bit dense in terms of technical ideas. He does go in and through a lot of philosophy and some psychology, and I find that fascinating, and you may as well, though again, it's a little bit thick. But what it really does is illuminate our modern concept of who we are as humans. What is your identity? Who am I? And hopefully that doesn't sound too dry and boring to you. And I'm not gonna even summarize the book really, other than kind of tell you the kernel, the bottom line. But you have to realize that we're in a different age. When the Puritans came in the 1600s with the Christian culture, we are well beyond that. In the 1700s, when the revolutionary spirit created this great nation, we're beyond that. In the 1800s, where we defeated slavery, many other worldly evils, we're well beyond that. When we got to the 1900s and elevated through industrialization and other things, much of the poverty, really of the whole developed world, we are now in a different headspace. We're beyond the 50s, where everyone has a shared morality, more or less, or at least we're existing on the fumes of that shared morality that had existed for several hundred years in this country previous. Now we're in this place where we are reaping what we have sown. And as you know, that reaping is not pretty. This is the reason that we needed to look at that story about the drag queen kids show. This is what we're reaping. It's little kids stuffing dollar bills into the clothing, what there was of men dressed up like provocative women. This is what we are sowing now. This is what we are reaping. So we're back to this modern self. Previously, in other generations, and pretty much all generations of humanity, humans were born into a community with values and morals that adopt and conform to that community, because the community is the center of life, the family unit, the community beyond, and in large part, the church. The parents had the lion's share of this responsibility. It was the parents' job to civilize their children into the broader cultural context, to strengthen the girls and to civilize the boys, because anyone who has ever had kids, and little kids know, especially little boys, they are vastly uncivilized and they're little barbarians and they run around trying to destroy everything. Children don't come out knowing how to function in society. The parents teach them this. This is how civilization works and how it has been done for millennia at this point. And by the way, it's the biblical model for family. But this is now the old way. Family, church, school, eventually work were institutions that helped in this process as children develop through different stages. Then we get to this past 50 years when a giant shift happens. And this is what this book, The Rise and Triumph of Modern Self by Carl Trueman, talks about. And really it began a couple hundred years before that. And I'm not going to get into all of the liberalism and psychology and philosophy in it. You can read the book. It's a great book to go through that. The point is this: we have a new liberal view of who and what a person is, where you get your identity. This new identity is not about who you are in your family or in relationship to your relatives or in relationship to your community or in relationship to God or the church or school or even the state. No, the new identity is all about you. Who do you want to be? And now, through this revelation, through these new ideas about self, there are literally no limits. Authenticity is the only value. You must be true to yourself. So there are no rules, no institutions, no authority, no God who can tell you who you really are. If there are people or parents or churches or leaders or pastors or even politicians or anyone telling you that you are not who you think you are, they are wrong and they must be silenced. And this is where we are as a society now. You have traditionalists, men and women who want to get married to each other. That's why I started with the silly little poem that first comes love, then comes marriage, then the baby and the baby carriage. This is an old view. This view is not supported anymore because that's traditional. That's the way things were. Now you have to be who you are. So if you have these traditionalists, these men and women who want to get married and have children and raise them to go to church, these are the radical people. Then you have the quote unquote new normal people who don't want to marry each other and want to change their pronouns to whatever they want. They believe your traditional values are dangerous. Period. Hear that. Dangerous. Actually, physically dangerous. They're literally dangerous, and you must be stopped because you are in the way of their preferred future. You get in the way of them being fully authentic about who they are, or at least who they think they are. So these institutions like normal family and church and God are a threat to their way of life, and you are then morally bad. That's why I'm talking specifically in moral terms. This is about right and wrong, good and evil, at least according to this new idea. This is why you get to hear words are violence and silence is violence. And there are microaggressions happening all over the place. So you need a safe space to protect your identity and to protect your group of people from me, from you, from those traditionalists. Because anything you say, but not only what you say, your very existence is literally a threat. If they look over at you and you have a wife and a kids and you go to church, your very lifestyle is antithetical to their entire existence. So this is how we get to words are actual violence. Words can't be violent in any way literally. They can't unless you literally think your concept of yourself is who you are. And when your concept of reality crashes with actual reality, you have to come to terms with why you are wrong. But of course, you cannot be wrong about who you are. You are who you are. Live your truth. You be you. These are the mantras of the new self that is not based on family or community or God or even reality, and how you get to men actually being women. Because you can be whatever you believe you are. So when reality crashes into a person who has constructed themselves from within, this feels like an actual attack on identity. And now we get to the intersection of this new concept of self and politics. This is why me I and others talk constantly about the Christian founding of America. America was founded on Christian morality. That's what you heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was founded on Christian morality, and that morality developed for generations the concept of self. You knew who you were based on your family, your community, and whether you knew it or not, Christianity. The values and morals of Christianity run throughout the Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the moral customs of the land. But it is these very laws, these customs, these morals that are now at odds with the values and goals of this new modern self, this quote unquote authentic self. So now this is where we get to this AP article that says, and the MSNBC article that say that Christianity is really the problem. Because we've removed the structures of family, we've removed morality, we've removed church, and of course God, and built our self-identity on something else. So when you see actual Christianity lived out in the public square, alarm bells go off for these people because that is not allowed. You cannot live your faith out in real life. That has to be confined to the corners of your home and maybe, if we let you, your actual church building. That's it. You don't get to do it at work. You don't get to do it at school. You definitely don't get to do it in politics. There is no Christianity in any of these places because if there were, that reality would crash with the reality that these people have created for themselves. So you get to quotes like this about candidate Doug Mastriano winning the Republican gubernatorial primary in Pennsylvania. This is out of the article. The article titled Christian Nationalism on the Rise in Some GOP Campaigns. So again, this man ran for governor in the Republican primary in Pennsylvania. This article says, the victory party took on the feel of an evangelical worship service after Doug Mastriano won Pennsylvania's Republican gubernatorial primary this month. As a Christian singer led the crowd in song, some raised their arms towards the heavens in praise. End quote. So they compare this celebration to a church service, which is really, 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 really bad. You cannot live your faith out in open. It goes on to say, Mastriano opened his remarks by evoking scripture. God uses the foolish to confound the wise, he claimed. He claimed Pennsylvania freedom would be snatched away if his Democratic opponent wins in November and casts the election in a starkly religious terms. With another biblical reference, let's choose this day to serve the Lord. Again, quoting Bible verses is very, very bad. You can't do that in public. You definitely can't do that in politics, according to this article. And Mastriano is a state senator, retired Army colonel. He has not only made faith central to his personal story, but has woven conservative Christian beliefs, danger, danger, and symbols into the campaign, becoming the most prominent example in this election cycle of what some observers call a surge of Christian nationalism among Republican candidates. First, this is the thing. Any religious person, now Christian, Jew, Muslim, this is just what they do in their life. If God is really in your life, then God is in everything you do. If you really believe in God, if you really follow after God, then you do that everywhere you go, in everything. This shouldn't be controversial and is the way that American politics has gone for centuries, literally up until the last 5 minutes. But now this is very controversial. And it is because religion, God, family stand in the way of this new self-identity that they must create, or they already have created. And this idea that there is an authority outside of the self cannot be in place. It cannot. So here's what's going on. The new ethics, the new morality of this culture does not fit with Christianity. It does not fit with Christian morality, biblical morality. The problem, and some people see this, whether they realize it or not, is that America is built on biblical morality. The Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights are all built on biblical morality. And if someone tells you otherwise, they're either wrong and they haven't read it, or they're just lying. You can pretend you created a secular morality and laws that someone invented out of the goodness of their hearts, but that's just not true or even possible. What is a law based on if it's not based on some kind of morality? There is nothing. There is nothing. If we are just secular humanists, Darwinists, evolutionists, if you just came out of the soup one day, then it is just survival of the fittest. And then the strongest and biggest wins. If that's the atheistic view that you're looking at a secular humanist view, if you just say that good things are good things, why? Why are good things good things? If there's no God, if there's no morality that's based on who we know God to be, then what is the point of morality? Where does that morality come from? I have not been given a good answer for that because there is no good answer. Morality can only come from something beyond yourself. If you make up your own morality, then at some point you're going to fall short of your own morality. We can't even keep our own rules. Try and set a rule for yourself today and make it a day without breaking it. You can't. We can't do it. We have to find our morality outside of ourselves. So now we get to this place where if you mention religion or God or any context outside of a church service or your house, you are the threat. It is you that is wrong and dangerous and a threat to, quote unquote, our democracy. And this is a crazy departure from even a few decades ago on the Democrat side, whom I don't agree with at all. But just go listen to old speeches from Kennedy or FDR, and they talked about religion. They quoted God often. And this was not controversial just a couple of decades ago. But now it is Christian nationalism and the real threat in America to our democracy. This article goes on and says, quote, scholars generally define Christian nationalism as going beyond policy debates and championing a fusion of American and Christian values, symbols, and identity. Christian nationalism, they say, is often accompanied by a belief that God has destined America, like the biblical Israel, for a special role in history and that it will receive divine blessing or judgment depending on its obedience. Yes, that's just religion. If you believe that by following after God, he will bless you, or by not following after God, he will curse you, that's just Bible. Whether you're a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, if you're talking about the Quran, like if you follow it, you will be blessed. If you don't follow it, you will be cursed. This is what every religion believes, period. But Christians are being singled out here and saying they are terrible, they are nationalists, they are theocratic, they want you to follow after them or they will kill you, which is not true. And this is what we're put into. Like a real Christian nationalism would be, this is a Christian country. You must follow Christ. You must be in a Christian religion, or else you get kicked out of the country, period. That would actually be what Christian nationalism is. It's actual theocratic, like you follow God, or you don't live here, or you don't survive, or you get killed. I mean, this has happened throughout history. It's not great, but that's real Christian nationalism. This is just someone saying, hey, I am a Christian, therefore it informs everything that I do. Therefore, if I follow after God, God will bless me. And if I don't follow after God, God will curse me, period. Again, that's Christian, Jew, Muslim. That theology of judgment is fully normal. And in America specifically has been the norm of America for all of its existence until this moment. So this article goes on to say, some of Idaho's Republican primaries for the legislature were won by candidates touting Christian values. Oh no, the shame, the horror, the terror. They said they were Christians. This is the crazy world that we live in now. And one of the writers here went on to say, quote, to my mind, white Christian nationalism is really the threat, Jones said, end quote. This is it, right? This is it. When they say what they believe what they say. Being a Christian, having Christian values is a problem. I'll summarize a little bit more of this article. Here are the things they define as Christian nationalism. Go to church, believe America is special, approve of traditional marriage, oppose transgender ideology, oppose abortion, oppose illegal immigration, and possibly voted for Trump. So this is now at least half of America, potentially even more. And these are Christian nationalists, and they are bad, and they're the threat to America, and they're the threat to those that fight against this. And that's even where you get to that first clip that I played, where the guy is talking about, where the representative is talking about gun violence, because if you don't agree and you are morally wrong and you have a weapon, now you are the biggest threat in America, period. And this is where we are. This is where you get to statements like, you can't legislate my morality because you are evil, because you are not letting me live my truth, and be who I am. In the other article on MSN, I'm not going to read most of it, but Jahan Jones writes, quote, why Christian nationalism is suddenly at the forefront. That's the name of the article. He says, all this exposure is serving its purpose, drawing the ugliness of Christian nationalism out of the shadows so it can be seen publicly for what it is. Oppressive, far right, conservative, wrapped in scripture. And there it is. Conservative Christians with their oppressive values, with their oppressive morality, with their conservatism, and with their scripture, that evil, terrible scripture. This is what is really wrong with America, according to this side. And once we rid America of all the Christianity, then we can rebuild it for the better on a secular ideal or something. This, of course, includes transgender ideology, abortion on demand past birth, drag queen dance parties, which we just saw, children, and all other manner of pagan ritual. And somehow to them, this seems better. If this is your first hearing of issues like this, you may be saying, it's not that bad. It will get back to normal soon. It's not going to. This is why we are where we are. And this is why books like The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self are important, because they show us what is really going on inside the hearts of people. The difference here is what is in the heart. Is your heart based on the morality that comes from outside of you, the morality of the church, the Bible, Christianity, the community, your family, or is your morality based on what is inside of you that you have, I guess, invented and said, yes, why can't I be like this? Why can't I act like this? Why wouldn't I dance for little children when I'm half naked? Why is that bad? I'm just teaching them. It's educational. That's what people say. That's what we heard in this clip. And that is the end result, because why wouldn't it be? This is why it's so important. It's so important for you to take responsibility for your spiritual health and the spiritual health of your children and your family, because no one else is going to do it. And this culture is very against it. And what we need is, just to be really clear, not a Christian nation, but a nation of Christians. You need to follow Jesus. You need to teach your children their need to follow Jesus. The church needs to get serious about becoming strengthened for the spiritual battle that is raging on around this culture and gaining speed. And we're getting to this place where it's going to be harder and harder. And so I want to kind of end with this quote from the book, because this helps us understand the real cost of what is going on, because what we're getting to when you hear me and what I've said, and if you believe it or not, that the Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights are based on biblical morality. Things like you can't limit the free expression of religion or free speech. If those are based on biblical morality, but we have to get rid of biblical morality according to the culture, then religious freedom is really what is at stake, because you can't have religious freedom and have super authentic individuality, because religious freedom tells you who you are and who you should become. Authentic reality coming from within you, you be you, live your truth. Those are literally at odds, and they cannot exist in the same place. So he says, given this, it's hard to conceptualize a culture in which the rights of religious conservatives and the rights of those who identify as sexual minorities can both be accommodated. It is precisely because matters of basic identity, and therefore what constitutes dignity and recognition, are at stake, that makes a negotiated settlement impossible. In other words, these two worlds cannot live together. I'll go on with the quote. To allow religious conservatives to be religious conservatives is to deny that people are defined by their sexual orientation. And to allow that people are defined by their sexual orientation is to assert that religious conservatism is irrational bigotry and dangerous to the unity of the Commonwealth. This is exactly what we've been talking about and seen through some of these examples. Either you live by radical sexual ideology and you be you and live your truth and make up whatever you need to make up to live in that authentic truth, or you live in a world where biblical morality, religious morality, family, and community shape who you are. You cannot live in both worlds. There is no middle way here. That would seem, I'll continue with a little bit more of the quote. That would seem to make the free exercise of religion, in terms of the individual right to apply his beliefs to life outside the Sunday worship service, right, outside of church, something that can no longer be assumed. So this is Truman's point and my point as well, that I think is correct. They want to relegate Christianity not only to the home or to the church, but really to nowhere. Because once you acknowledge that there is something else, once you acknowledge that there's more to this life than just what you have invented and your truth and your authenticity, then you have to acknowledge that you might be wrong. And there is no room in this culture for being wrong. You have to be right 100% and just live in the confidence of that, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the issues, regardless of the consequences. Those don't matter, even if they're terrible, even if depression and anxiety and substance are at the highest point they've ever been in the history of humanity. Those consequences don't matter, and they couldn't possibly be related to the fact that no one knows who they are because they've tried to define themselves from themselves, and it just doesn't work. There's just no way to actually do this. So I'm going to end with Jesus because I like to end with Jesus and end with Bible and give you something that I hope is encouraging. It's important to understand that this is not new, and it shouldn't even give you despair. You need to have hope because as things get darker, the light will shine brighter, and that is really the truth. But here's Jesus talking to his disciples and reminding them that his path was not easy. Neither will ours be. Matthew 16. This is Jesus. All this I have told you, so that you will not fall away. They will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they're offering a service to God. They will do such things because they have not known the Father or me. As I have told you this, so that when your time comes, you will remember I warned you about them. Jesus is saying, in the church, out of the church, in the culture, people are going to think that they're doing the right thing. They're even going to sacrifice you and think they're doing a good service to their God. And we see this over and over again. These secular gods are in charge of the world. But Jesus goes on to say, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And that's a great place to end, that no matter what is going on in and around your lives, you can hold true and know that God has still got this. We are still in his care and we are still in his plan. Jesus is king, and one day every nation, every tribe, every tongue, every person will bow down and worship Jesus. We just want to start doing that now because this is our Father's world. God bless. And as always, keep the faith.